Okay, let's talk about the Cold War. It was a time of immense global tension, a terrifying stare-down between the United States and the Soviet Union. People were building bomb shelters in their backyards. School children were practicing duck-and-cover drills, which honestly wouldn't do much against a nuclear blast, unless the bomb was made of pillows. Meanwhile, the CIA, America's top spy agency, was cooking up wild ideas. Ideas stamped with top secret in big, scary red letters. You'd expect plans for invisible jets or laser beams. But one declassified file revealed something far more fluffy. They were eyeing your household pet as a potential intelligence asset. Yes, really. In Langley's shadowy corridors, someone pitched a plan fit for a bad Bond scene. Turn a cat into a walking, purring listening device. A spy, an agent of espionage, a creature that mostly wants to nap, meow for food at 3 a.m., and systematically knock things off your desk. That was their secret weapon. This wasn't scribbles on a napkin, it was a fully funded, classified, multi-million-dollar project. They even gave it a code name, Project Acoustic Kitty. Sounds cute, like a cartoon cat with a tiny guitar. But reality was stranger and more absurd. The plan? Surgically implant a microphone and a transmitter into a living cat, and send it on missions to eavesdrop on America's enemies. Because of course you'd trust a famously independent animal. The audacity of it is staggering. The Cold War was a technological arms race. Spy planes that could fly at the edge of space and submarines hiding in the deepest ocean. And yet people were trying to get a cat to care about national security. This story captures the paranoia, the desperation, and the baffling weirdness of the era. A tale of science, spies, and one very unlucky feline. So why on earth would the CIA even consider turning a cat into a spy? To understand that, you have to understand the world of Cold War espionage. This wasn't like the movies where a handsome spy charms his way into a villain's lair. It was a gritty, dangerous game of information gathering. The Americans wanted to know what the Soviets were planning. The Soviets wanted to know what the Americans were planning. Getting that information was incredibly difficult. Embassies were fortresses, guarded and swept for bugs constantly. Spies risked capture, torture, or worse. Every conversation, every secret meeting, was a potential goldmine of intelligence. And getting a microphone into the right room was the holy grail. The problem was that traditional listening devices, or bugs, were getting easier to find. Both sides had sophisticated detection equipment. You couldn't just tape a microphone under a table anymore and hope for the best. The enemy would find it in minutes. Spies needed a new way to get their ears into secret places, a method so unconventional that no one would ever suspect it. They needed a delivery system for their technology that could blend in, move around, get close to targets. They needed something that could go where a human agent couldn't, a park bench, a private courtyard. This led to a period of intense, sometimes bizarre creativity within the intelligence community. They explored all sorts of strange ideas, exploding cigars, cameras hidden in cigarette packs, a fake tree stump loaded with surveillance gear planted near a Soviet base. It was a time when no idea was too strange to consider, as long as it might work. Weaponize a pigeon, turn a dolphin into a saboteur. They tried. The goal was to outsmart the enemy, to be one step ahead in a game where the stakes were global supremacy. And that's where the cat comes in. Think about it from the CIA's perspective for a moment. What's something you see everywhere in cities all over the world that nobody pays any attention to? A stray cat. Cats can wander into gardens, sit under windows, loiter in alleys without anyone batting an eye. They are the masters of looking like they belong exactly where they are, even when they absolutely do not. A cat could, in theory, walk right up to a group of Soviet officials having a secret conversation on a park bench, and no one would shoo it away. It was the perfect disguise, a living, breathing vessel for covert surveillance. Once the CIA committed to the idea, they had to figure out how to actually do it. This wasn't a simple matter of strapping a tape recorder to a cat's back. The technology had to be completely hidden. So, the agency's Directorate of Science and Technology got to work. Their job was to transform an ordinary cat into a sophisticated piece of espionage equipment. The project reportedly cost around $20 million. For that price, you could have bought a fleet of tanks or, several thousand non-spy cats. But this was a top priority mission. The surgical procedure was incredibly complex and, frankly, a bit horrifying. A veterinary surgeon was brought in, implant a tiny microphone into the cat's ear canal, a small radio transmitter at the base of the cat's skull, a thin wire antenna woven into its fur, running down its back to its tail. The whole system was powered by a small battery, also implanted inside the animal. The idea was that the cat would just wander near the targets and the CIA agents parked in a nearby van would listen in on everything. It was Frankenstein's monster, but for spying. But creating the bionic cat was only half the battle. The other half was training. As anyone who has ever owned a cat knows, they are not exactly known for their obedience. You can't just tell a cat to go sit by those two men discussing state secrets. The cat will look at you, blink slowly, and then go take a nap in a sunbeam. The CIA scientists spent countless hours trying to train the cat to follow simple commands and go where it was told. They tried using sounds and other cues to direct its movements. But the cat had its own ideas about where it wanted to go, and those ideas rarely involved international espionage. This training phase was plagued with problems. One of the biggest issues they encountered was the cat's attention span, or lack thereof. The cat would often get distracted by simple things like looking for a snack. In one declassified document, the scientists noted that the cat would often wander off when it felt hungry. This was a major setback. How could you rely on your multi-million-dollar spy asset if its mission could be derailed by the scent of a discarded tuna sandwich? Despite these challenges, the team pressed on, convinced that they could overcome the cat's natural instincts. They believed they were on the verge of a breakthrough. After years of development, millions of dollars spent, and countless hours of frustrating training, the day finally came for Operation Acoustic Kitty to have its first field test. The CIA had chosen the perfect target, the Soviet embassy in Washington, D.C. It was a hub of enemy activity right on their doorstep. The plan was simple, at least on paper. The agents would park a van full of listening equipment across the street from the embassy. They would then release the surgically altered cat, which would hopefully, make its way across the road and settle down on a bench in the park outside the embassy. The specific targets were two men who regularly met on that park bench for conversations. The CIA suspected they were high-level Soviet officials, possibly intelligence agents themselves. Getting a recording of their private chats would be a massive intelligence victory. It was the kind of breakthrough that could change the course of the Cold War. Everything was in place. The van was packed with state-of-the-art receivers, the agents were tense with anticipation, and the cat was, well, probably just a cat, blissfully unaware of the critical role it was about to play in global geopolitics. Its tiny implanted microphone was ready to capture history. Imagine the scene inside that van. You have a group of serious CIA operatives, people who have dedicated their lives to protecting their country. They're huddled around their equipment, headphones on, waiting for the signal. The fate of this incredibly expensive and secret project rests on the four paws of one small animal. The door of the van slides open. An agent gently places the cat on the pavement. This is it, the culmination of all their work. The moment of truth. The cat is supposed to walk casually across the street, find the bench, and begin its historic mission of eavesdropping. The agents held their breath. They watched as their furry little spy took its first steps toward the embassy. The future of espionage was unfolding before their very eyes. If this worked, it would revolutionize how they gathered intelligence. No more risky human operations or easily detectable bugs. They could just send in an army of cats. It was a brilliant, if utterly mad, plan. The cat stood for a moment, looked left, looked right, and then started to walk. It was heading directly for the park, just as they had trained it to. For a fleeting second, it seemed like this insane, unbelievable scheme was actually going to work. So, there it is. The $20 million spy cat released from the van takes its first steps toward destiny. The CIA agents are watching, hearts pounding. This is the moment. The cat, now free, looks around at the big, bustling world outside its training facility. It sees the park, the trees, and the two Soviet men sitting on the bench. It also sees a busy Washington, D.C. street filled with cars. For a creature whose primary concerns up to this point were probably food and naps, this was a lot to take in. But it started to cross the road, seemingly on track to complete its mission. It was happening. It was actually happening. And then, it wasn't. Just as the cat stepped off the curb and into the street, a taxi came speeding down the road. And well, the taxi hit the cat. Instantly. The first ever mission of Operation Acoustic Kitty lasted less than 5 minutes and ended with their high-tech asset being unceremoniously flattened by a cab. The cat never even made it to the other side of the street. It never got near the bench. The tiny, expensive microphone never recorded a single word of Soviet secrets. The whole thing was over before it even began. It was a complete and total failure. You can just imagine the stunned silence in the CIA van. These highly trained spies who had spent years and a fortune just watched their groundbreaking invention get run over. There's a certain dark humor to it all. All that science, all that surgery, all that training, all that money, all for nothing. The plan had a fatal flaw. The creators had accounted for microphones, transmitters, and batteries, but they had completely forgotten to account for traffic. They had successfully built a cyborg cat, but they had failed to teach it how to look both ways before crossing the street, a lesson most human children learn for free. In a memo written shortly after the incident, a CIA official summed up the project with brutal honesty. They concluded that while the science part of building the cat was a success, they could turn a cat into a listening device. The practical application was a disaster. It was simply too difficult to train the cat to do what they wanted, especially in a real-world, unpredictable environment. The project was deemed a failure and was scrapped immediately. There would be no army of spy cats wandering the streets of Moscow. The entire bizarre chapter of Cold War espionage came to a very sudden, very final, and very flat end. Project Acoustic Kitty was a spectacular failure. The CIA spent millions, only to lose their spy cat to a passing taxi. The lesson? Even the most ingenious ideas can flop, especially when cats are involved. Still, the technology lived on, inspiring future spy gadgets, just not feline ones. Sometimes the best Cold War stories are the ones that end in the shredder.